Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Sinister Story Hour, a podcast brought to you by the Western Skies Podcast Network. Here we discuss a new case each week. We talk about crime, cults, conspiracies, and all things sinister. If you enjoy the show, please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Sinister Story Hour and on Twitter at Sinister Hour. You can also help support the show for as little as 99 cents per month. As always, thank you for listening, and let's jump in. Hi, everybody. What do you get when you cross a charismatic leader, people who are searching for spiritual experimentation, and a bunch of cute cat videos? You get tonight's story. Stay tuned because tonight's episode is most definitely weird. Hey guys, have you thought about making your own podcast but you're not really sure where to start? That's how I was at first, and really the only choice that stood out to me was Anchor. And let me tell you why. It was completely free to start, and it has all the tools that allow me to record and edit my podcast right from my phone or computer. And they distribute the podcast for me, so it's heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. There's no minimum listenership, and you can start making money from day one. And really everything you need to make your podcast is all in one place. I love it, and I know you will too. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Sinister Story Hour. My name is Steph and I'm your host. If you are joining me for the first time, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who's listening and rating, reviewing, liking, subscribing, and following me on social media. It's been awesome this past week, so thank you so much. We actually made a top 100 list on Good Pods this week, so thank you so much. And Andover, Massachusetts. You guys are listening like crazy there. Thank you so much for that. We added Brazil over the past week. That's exciting. So thank you, Brazil. And it's just so fun to see people tuning in from different places and experiencing this all together. So thank you so much. Now we'll get into tonight's story, which takes place both in Washington and in Columbia, Tennessee, with a woman named Cheryl and her small group of followers. The group is originally in Washington, but they decided to move to Columbia, Tennessee at one point in order to wait quietly for the apocalypse. They considered this move to be kind of like the version of the biblical Exodus, and that was just really one mission that they had. The other mission was to rescue as many cats as possible. Now, if you're having trouble finding the connection between cat rescue and salvation, same. But it turns out that Cheryl firmly believed that cats were just the divine creatures that would help to carry those 144,000 souls that are mentioned in the book of Revelation straight to heaven. So we'll talk more about the cats later. First, let's get into a bit of a background on this group. Now, I do want to start with a very huge disclaimer here. There are two very, very distinct sides to this story, even still. So first you have a group of former followers. Now, the former followers, we're going to go into a few of the stories directly from them. These are people that still speak about the damage that was done by this group, the horrible things they experienced in this group, and they claim that the group is a cult. Cheryl is seen as a prophet. They worship her. They say Cheryl claims to be a divine Magdalene, which apparently means that she's the reincarnated Messiah, and that she will create a new Eden after the apocalypse. They claim that at one time they too worshipped Cheryl, even going as far as leaving their own families for the cult, which, I mean, what else is a cult, right? You obviously leave behind something to join these groups. Now, they view their mission today as trying to educate people on the dangers of the group. They have a Facebook page to communicate their experiences. A lot of them have just recently started speaking out on different podcasts and interviews and things like that. So you can look that up. Feel free to do your own research on this. Now, the second group is the group of people that's still in this group. Now, it's the Eva's Eden group, and they are specifically just a cat rescue now, according to them. They deny everything. They deny all of these claims, and they claim that the former members are nothing but a hate group. They're founded by Cheryl's ex-husband, they say, which there's absolutely no proof of that her ex-husband is at all involved with these former followers of hers, but that's who gets the blame for basically the whole thing, and that he is trying to target and take down their ministry, and so it must be all his fault. They've responded to the former members with letters, threats of legal action, and of course some very cute cat videos, which does it for anyone, right? So I do want to make that clear. This group is still running as far as some people know, and so I'll just let you make up your own mind, have your own opinion, but there are two sides to every story, and those are the two sides to this one. Now we'll get into a little bit more about the former followers and what they are speaking out about. They have a lot to say about this group, and one of those former followers' names is Michelle Lamphier. She first met Cheryl back in the late 90s. Now, this has been going on for quite a while, that Cheryl has been teaching and preaching and starting her own church and changing ministries and moving and just kind of a lot of different things, a lot of different directions that she's gone. Michelle at that time was a new mom, and she had just started to attend church again. So at the time, Cheryl Ruthven actually was Cheryl Walker, and Cheryl was one of the very first people that Michelle met when she went back to church. She describes Cheryl as tall, blonde, rich, and almost irresistible magnetism. She said that people idolized Cheryl and went on to say that every woman wanted to be her best friend. Quite a few people from the church believed that Cheryl had been given a gift from God, and honestly, the irresistible magnetism is enough of a gift for me. I would love that. But apparently, she was also given a gift of prophecy. Mary Gunderson was also a very dear friend of Cheryl's. She was actually a former children's pastor in an Assembly of God church. A lot of these people you'll see had a Pentecostal background, Assembly of God, very much a Christian background when they came to Cheryl, and they were just kind of searching for more. So Mary had been the children's pastor. She was working toward becoming a worship leader. One day she was actually in Walmart, and she saw a business card for Cheryl's ministry on a bulletin board, and she wanted to check it out. She said that she heard Cheryl preach one time, and she was immediately hooked. Mary and Cheryl immediately became inseparable friends. Mary wanted to spend every free moment with her new pastor. Eventually, she became convinced that this woman was not only a pastor, but a true prophet of God. She felt that as long as she was close to Cheryl, she was assured salvation. So it's almost like she didn't want to be apart from Cheryl at all, because as long as she was really close to Cheryl, she was assured that salvation, and she just had that really secure feeling around her. Soon after that, Mary's younger sister Rachel had also joined the church. And Rachel and Mary were very, very close. They were best friends at the time, and Mary had been talking to her a lot about this new ministry. And Rachel just felt like there was something more she was seeking. She had also had that background in the Assembly of God church, but recently she had become kind of distant in her own church, and she was feeling distant from God. She was craving a really strong spiritual connection with God, and she believed that she found it that night at Freedom Fire. She said that it was literally just like maybe 2 to 3 weeks before she was 100% all in to this ministry. She described it as feeling like a waterfall, walking into the church and immediately feeling alive again. So Rachel described being with Cheryl as a spiritual high. That's one thing that was pretty unanimous among these former followers, that they loved the feeling of being with Cheryl, that it was just basically like riding this spiritual high the entire time you were with her. And she shared the belief that being close to Cheryl was basically being close to God. And like I said, it's a very popular opinion among all of the former followers. Rachel's quoted as saying, "It was like I finally arrived at who and what I was supposed to be by following her teachings and learning to be like her." End quote. So, yeah, she was trying to teach people to be more like her, because eventually she would go on to teach that she was not just a pastor, she was a prophet of God. Well, so far, this all sounds amazing, right? People on a spiritual high, they're seeking God, they're finding exactly what they've been looking for. But just like always, there's always a downside to people following these people, right? So I'm going to take a quick break and I'll be right back to talk about that. Welcome back. So far, this has been such a wonderful story. The ideal religious experience, right? People finding a church where they feel like they're growing, they're getting closer to God, they're becoming more spiritual. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. So let's get into it a little bit. Cheryl claimed that she had direct contact with God. Now, if you're the one speaking for God, you're literally the mouthpiece for God. You can do anything and say anything, and they have to obey you, right? So that's exactly the case in this situation. In fact, if you didn't listen to Cheryl and follow her instructions, you would run the risk of being banished from the group. And as much as Cheryl wanted you to learn from her and be like her, there was a very fine line, and only she knew where it was. So she did teach for people to be more like her, to become like her, and she loved that. It was flattering to her. But there were also times that she hated it, and she would publicly shame people for it, or they would even be ostracized for a time. Some of the former members even described that you could not wear the same perfume as her. If you wore the same perfume and she found out about it, you would literally be publicly shamed, possibly ostracized, kicked out of the group for a time because you were trying to be too much like her. God forbid you ever did your hair like her or any of those types of things, because she felt so threatened by that. And so there was just such an odd line of people wanting to be like her, but afraid to be too much like her and not knowing where the actual line was. Now, Michelle Lamphier, who was the first former follower that I spoke of, stated that Cheryl knew exactly how to put the fear of God in them all. And sadly, among those banished from the group was Michelle's own teenage daughter, Shaylin. Shaylin was 16 at the time that most of this stuff happened. She had been caught drinking. It wasn't the first time that she had been in trouble with Cheryl, or Cheryl had actually yelled at her before, and she had gotten in trouble with her before for not following Cheryl's instructions all of the time. She's a typical teenager, right, in church life, and Cheryl did not like it. So Shaylin was grounded at first when she was caught drinking, and Cheryl told her parents to get rid of her. And I couldn't believe that when I read that the first time. She literally told her parents, "You need to get rid of her." That's exactly what they did. They were so loyal to this woman that they took Shaylin into the backyard, joined hands in a circle with her brothers, and cast her out of the family. Shaylin recalls the account of her experience in a post on Facebook, saying that her parents said, quote, "We give the devil permission to overtake her and bring her to his side. She's no longer covered with our covering," end quote. And that she was basically on her own and that the devil could now take her. And Shaylin says on Facebook, "My own parents did this. They gave my soul away." And of course, Michelle regrets all of this now, having left the group, and she's looking at it from the other side. But literally at this time, she was doing anything and everything to please Cheryl, obviously. It was also common for Cheryl to command her followers to change their beliefs. She would just change her beliefs quite often, and they had to change it to conform with her prophecies. They at first stopped